was just his memoir, but it was autobiography from his birth and day one, his family's history, probably guessing that maybe someday I would read it and appreciate it and tell more people about it. And so they went from paper and pencil to typewriter to computer to disc, and I got the disc and I took it from there.
Welcome, everyone, to the Road Less Traveled Show. This is a show about people that were successful in a previous career and left that career to go down a different path. I'm your co-host, Richard Coyne.
And I'm your co-host, Bill Zahller.
On today's show, we're so pleased to have Robert Wolf with us today. Dr. Wolf, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time and the support.
Absolutely, Rob. First off, can we start with a little bit of your backstory? Can you tell us what your initial career was and how long you were on that path?
Well, I was born in Detroit and raised in suburban Detroit, went to high school, K through 12 in that area where my dad practiced medicine, OBGYN. Since ninth grade, I always wanted to be a medical doctor. I wanted to follow my dad's footsteps, although I wasn't that crazy about that specialty. I went to Tufts University for undergrad, University of Michigan for medical school. I did my internship year at Framingham Union Hospital, then Framingham Union, famous for the Framingham Heart Studies, now called Metro West, suburban Boston, residency at Rhode Island Hospital, Brown University, and I did my neuroradiology fellowship at Yale University, New Haven, Connecticut. So that was probably the first half of my life. Literally, that was indentured servantry up until about age 29 or 30 before I finally started making a living. I went to a hospital-based practice for 4 years and then another hospital-based practice for another 7 years, full call, full nights, full weekends, full time. After those 11 years, I decided life was short and quality of life was important. So I downshifted to part-time. So I was 43. Thankfully, my wife was frugal and we saved, we invested, we had no debt. And I went to part-time. I was down to 10 days a month. And then and when I was working from home, so that was not my initial foray into teleradiology, but it was my first job where everything was entirely teleradiology and almost entirely from home. And before that, when we had night call and weekends, of course, we were doing telemedicine, teleradiology. So since I was essentially a resident and moonlighting and taking call, back then it was sort of a clunker, if you will, a clunker big TV set, big like my old bar mitzvah Sony Trinitron, where you had to shag this thing around and bruise your calves every weekend. And head CTs would take 20 minutes, 15 minutes to come in to read. And now we get cases in an instant and it's all set up nicely. And you can carry laptops around and iPads, and you can do your work just about anywhere if the resolution's satisfactory. So pretty much after that, I was working from home for part-time for a short period of time. And then things didn't work out there for different reasons. And I went back to a real job. It was really nice. I was working 2 days a week, 5 years at Roger Williams Hospital in Rhode Island. So at that point, I had worked out of Massachusetts, Michigan, and back to Rhode Island. My wife and I moved back to Massachusetts at the time. And I was working from home, first Michigan and then back to Rhode Island and then another job in Rhode Island. Something didn't work out towards the end, 2016. A month later, my mom passed away. So that actually was just a miracle. Things worked out. I spent a year taking care of my mom's affairs. The next year I retired and my friend, Dr. Sweet, who was actually just here, he evacuated out of Bonita Springs and he snowbirds up in Michigan. And he spent the night here because they still have no power. He had to get out. Mm-hmm. But he got me this job because he needed some help. He was short-staffed. And that brought me to my office. Back then it was I want to get this straight, I was in Massachusetts already. And that brought me to the book. The disc of my dad's story brought me to my dad's book. So I'm still practicing radiology now through his group. I'm a neuroradiologist by training, but I just do X-ray and ultrasound. Plenty of jobs available, plenty of things to do if I really wanted to go back to full-time and call on weekends or even part-time from home. But I pivoted to the book. It sort of called out to me like, this might sound corny, but Superman's kryptonite. It sort of summoned me, it called me. So I between cases, I plugged the disc in and I started reading my dad's story. This would have been the second time. I probably read his book 20 years before that, not his book, but his story, because it was still just on a disc. That involved from autobiography, pen and paper, typewriter, put on a desktop, then onto a disc, and now it's on thumb drive and emails. And ebooks and hardbacks and paperbacks, all kinds of modes. So that's really evolved too, the book writing and the publishing business, of course. So that brought me to the book, and I started working on the book between cases. And the more stories I read, I said, wow, all these things that my dad and these people went through, and how good we have it in this country, and how spoiled we are. I mean, we work hard here. When we work hard, and with a little luck, we hope we do well in this country, and we have that opportunity. But we're not, speaking of thumb drive, we're not put down with our thumbs by the upper crust, by the select few that are racist or anti-Semitic or whatever you want to call it. So. And I couldn't believe miracle after miracle, good stories and bad stories, lots of adventures. My dad outwitting the Nazis and the communists, amazing. His multiple escapes, my family's saga, my grandparents I never met, and their destiny, their fate is in the book, of course. It also describes Hungary, the history of Hungary from the 1920s, even a little bit from World War I, well into the 50s, by the time my parents left the country after the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. So my mom was actually in med school, and she was 13 months from graduating when they had left the country, and she never went back, unfortunately. During the I don't want to say too much about the book and give too much away, because I want people to read the book and read about the adventures, but my dad was a frontliner during the Hungarian Revolution. Being an OBGYN, he also trained in surgery, so the trauma team needed his help, and there were a lot of casualties and a lot of deaths in that war. It was just a 2-week, maybe 3-week war, but there were 3,000 deaths in that war. It wasn't insignificant. Plus displaced people, the refugees, destroyed property, of course. I mean, now the Ukraine war is the Hungarian Revolution on steroids, if you will, but it's the same idea. I mean, nothing much has changed. They're imperialist Russians hiding behind the nuclear menace. Persecution. I mean, anti-Semitism seems to be on the other side of the coin this time, but I don't think Putin really cares about anti-Semitism. It's hard for you to sell that to me, but we'll see what happens. You know, they just annexed Ukraine, of course, which they did with Hungary and Poland and Czechoslovakia at the time, Czech Republic now. Ukraine was, Hungary was. I mean, the USSR obtained quite a bit of territory, of course, after World War II, and it didn't work out for the Hungarians really well. So things were quiet for a while. My dad got to go back to med school. Well, he wasn't in med school yet, but being Jewish, lucky you can go to high school. And so finally, there's such a shortage of doctors in the country that, and US-backed help, my dad was able to go and some other Jewish doctors. And there was a quota, I think it was like 10% at the max of Jewish doctors. Right after World War II, the Jews that remained, there weren't many in Hungary. Most of them were killed, about 500,000. And and late in the war, it was like this desperate attempt to exterminate whoever they could at the time. Even the story on the Danube is in the book, and you may know that story. Really, at the end of the war, the shooting of innocent people right on the Danube River. They didn't get the Schindler's List type of ending where the guard just walked out of the building where he did his last talk. So unfortunately, so it didn't work out well for everything. My dad was never in. He wasn't in Auschwitz, but people he knew, including family, and my mom's family were there, and my dad's, but he was being tortured in forced labor camp. He was, they were beaten and urinated on and mistreated, and they starved. They were desperate for food all the time. Things were not pretty. So the stories, there's good stories and bad, but it's the truth. It's my dad's biography. And as a friend of mine would say, if dad said that that's what happened, then that's what happened. Because another theme throughout the book, besides anti-Semitism and racism, is integrity. And my dad, not only my dad had integrity, but also he was lucky enough to know people who also had integrity, who were also protective of his survival. And for a guy that had to run all over the country or march all over the country and in the end, desperately seeking asylum just because he was Jewish, amazing how he did it. So there's funny stories in there. There's sad stories. I shouldn't even be here. I mean, I'm lucky to be here. And the other thing too, like serendipity is another feature that if my dad's parents hadn't decided to move to Jur, Hungary, which was in the northwest part of the country, it was a industrial town in Hungary, and they moved from then Romania back to Hungary because that was their motherland, and maybe that was an ill-fated decision for them. So serendipity in the fact that if the United States had conquered Hungary rather than Russia, I'd probably be a Hungarian citizen now, not living in the United States, because it would have been a more than satisfactory place to live, such as the Netherlands or France or England. So, or even now West Germany. So, or Germany as it turns out to be. So,
yeah,
things have changed. There's a lot of serendipity. There's a lot of, my dad here's one story I'll tell. My dad missed an escape. He had multiple, but he missed an escape. He went to the wrong train station, and everybody else that made that train got arrested, including his medical school roommate. And that really hindered he was arrested for a prolonged period of time, and it hindered his medical career. And another theme in the book is my dad's, the balance between wanting to be free and wanting to be a physician, that hunger that he wanted to be a physician, and sometimes very conflicted about it. And finally he got both when he made it to the United States. But so that's, I guess that's kind of the book in a nutshell. I mean, it's sort of a summary. It's a lot said. I hope I didn't say too much. If you can edit things out, that would be great. I mean, I know you're recording me, but if I just don't want to say too much. It's an adventure. I think I want a lot of people to read the book. 10% of the proceeds goes to the Holocaust Museum, at least on my end. That's my plan. That's my next full circle and closure with my mom and dad. Growing up in the United States as a kid, I didn't really care that much about their history. I just became sort of immune to it. Children of Holocaust survivor syndrome. There's such a thing, I guess. Maybe I had it, maybe I didn't. But I was pretty impervious to it. And plus I'm busy with my career and family and just trying to make a living. And that was my focus. But meanwhile, my mom still educated people, friends, my wife, relatives, their neighbors over the perils of what had happened. And they continued to until they died. And they were very well-educated people. They believed in education, of course. They knew arts, they knew the arts, they knew the museums, they knew the operas, theaters. They loved to travel, and they shared that with the world, and really lived the second half of their lives really made up for, well, you never make up for the trauma and the tragedy that you go through. But if my dad had PTSD, you would never know it. He would have worked till the day he died. He would come home from work telling a dirty joke. I would say to my dad, how can you look at 50 of these women a day and then come home and be interested in sex or whatever? And he just laughed it off. He says, there's two different things. You've got a professional practice and you've got your home life too. So, and he subscribed to Playboy magazine, and he had pictures of 100 tuchuses, black and white, in his bathroom. And my mom was pretty good about, and he just had that sense of humor, and he was jovial, and he loved people, and he loved to laugh and tell jokes. And like him, I'm a foodie. My mom and dad were both foodies. They would have Hungarian goulash parties with a tripod and a big spit outside, and dressed like a gypsy. And he'd have two of them, one for his Hungarian friends who were all doing the chardash and dancing, and they'd have the live violinist. And then the other would be for his doctor friends and neighbors, and both parties were equally good. And I would sort of go out as a little kid, and I would say a couple of dirty words in Hungarian and get everybody laughing. I was kind of shy back then, only child, so I didn't really participate in their parties except to get my bowl of goulash, or guyash is really how you pronounce it. It's Hungarian guyash is how my mom would pronounce it, but most Americans pronounce it goulash. So
nice.
Fantastic people for knowing what they went through. And one regret is that I did this project too late. It'd been nice if I had done this 10, 20 years ago when my mom passed, but I never would have thought of it. So it's, but my dad and mom wrote, I mean, besides the Superman kryptonite reference, it's like my mom and dad wrote this thing knowing that I would publish it someday. And gosh darn it, even post-mortem, they're correct. So
Robert, so tell me about that. So your parents essentially documented and wrote their own autobiography and captured, their stories along the way. Did they publish that, or was it really just kind of, they tracked their own history and they wanted to get it down on paper for you and someday? How did that work? For
me and their closest friends, they actually, yes, they wrote their autobiography probably in the 70s. They took several years to do that. They wrote their autobiography all the way to their trips they visited South America in the 70s and Asia in the 70s, which 2 trips they didn't take me on. They did take me on quite a few trips, very memorable. But in the meantime, they were doing their autobiography, and they went from pen and paper to typewritten to, I think of Tinkers to Evers to Chance, the Tinkers to Evers to Chance, the double play combination. So they went from paper and pencil to typewriter to computer to disc. And then my mom passed away, and I got the disc and I took it from there. So it was not published anywhere. It was just his memoir but it was autobiography from his birth and day one, his family's history, talked about his mom and dad in World War One, their lives and their families, and just shared it with me, and probably guessing that maybe someday I would read it and appreciate it and tell more people about it. And
what a gift. I mean, I honestly, my dad really didn't talk about his past. And, I've heard stories from different, certainly from my in-laws. I heard some stories, but my dad didn't really go into a lot of detail. And I wish he had, because again, I'm sure there's some, brilliant stories along the way that, unfortunately I never got to hear about. So it's very, very cool that you did. So, yeah.
Very moving. It's a heartfelt project. It's a labor of love. I just turned 60. My dad would have been 100 this year.
Wow.
So that's happy birthday, happy. My mom would have been 89 this year too. So they were 11 years apart. So not love at first sight, but pretty close. I always used to yell at my mom, why didn't you finish going to medical school? Then we could have had twice as much money in the household but they did fine. They spent their money wisely, and it was all about education and of course travel and their entertainment. They were very diverse people, very well read, not only in history and their country, Judaism, the history of Israel, the United States. Not your average couple, not your average. I can't say average immigrant couple, because immigrants are coming in the United States in droves, and hopefully with our job market, we can place them in good spots rather than the Hungarians after World War II. The Hungarian Jews after World War II were placed in factories and farms. They didn't know what to do with them. And you imagine our government saying about the Jewish people in this country that they're only allowed to be here, here, and here, instead of doctors, lawyers, and running businesses. And you can imagine that. So, but that's how things were back then. So, and forced labor. People like my dad that were in forced labor camp. My dad was an escapee, so he was sort of at large or in limbo, working. He had a job when the war ended, right after machine gun fire and shrapnel and everything else. The very last minute before the war ended, they were rescued by a Romanian soldier ultimately. But and Romanians and Hungarians notoriously back then were not friendly with each other. So, but my dad was in limbo, so he was not treated like a lot of these forced laborers. Some of them were killed. They had these famous death marches. And of course, they had them in, was it Okinawa or I forget, maybe was it Okinawa? It was the Japanese death march. I can't remember what island.
Bataan.
It's correct. And but also the Hungarian forced labor. Some of the laborers were also taken on death marches. My dad, one of his escapes was hopefully to avoid that, thinking that that's where they're heading. They were conflicted about the war ending, who was going to win the war, whether they ended up in Austria, whether they ended up in Hungary. Those were tough decisions too. So he decided to stay in Hungary until he actually escaped when they fight, at the end of the Hungarian Revolution. So it's just all this conflict, and you don't have a lot of time to make these decisions either. So
it sounds like an amazing story, Robert. I remember, I think Richard and I both read the book, Sam Zell's Am I Being Too Subtle, his last one. He talked about his father, a similar initial story where he went back and he thought something was going to happen because he traveled around, I think, in sales around the area and saw things happening in the background and thought the war was really close, and went back, tried to convince the rest of the relatives to leave with him. They wouldn't leave, and they actually were on the last train out on their escape out of there. Just, serendipity again, just amazing that worked out timing wise. So, but I think there's some stories like that, like your father's, are so important to tell, because I think there's a lack of understanding of history, and the whole part about people that don't understand history are doomed to repeat it. I think is very, very true. So I think that we need to, keep these stories and understand them and understand what can happen if we go too far down different directions.
I agree. Now, one thing I just left out, I meant to say that the other forced laborers that survived ended up, they were treated like prisoners of war, unfortunately, for a certain amount of time. So, yes, I would like to leave this. I have 2 stepdaughters and 3 step grandchildren, and the book is for them too. The book is for them to help spread the word. As much as my target audience is pretty much age 30 to infinite, let's say, I want to get to the younger people. Of course, you want to see your book sold in bookshelves, either at Barnes and Noble or in an airport, which would be a miracle. But I want my book to be in classrooms, high school, college classrooms, Judaica, history, yeshivas, another story that it's possible to survive. It's possible to endure, but importantly, that we don't want racism to continue. We don't want anti-Semitism to continue. And there's gonna be a lot of people I can't convince. There's not gonna be a lot of turncoats for people that are on the other side, people that don't like deniers, let's say Holocaust deniers, for example. But if I can change one or two people, change their attitude, change their outlook, change their viewpoint towards Judaism and racism in general and anti-Semitism specifically, then I will have done my job. So and I think the book will influence a lot of people. I think it'll get a lot of people to think. And my early reviews coming in, they're telling me that. They're saying the stories are fantastic, and people had no idea what was going on. Everybody knew what was happening in England and Germany and elsewhere, but not so much Hungary. So, and it covers not only the Holocaust, but also the Hungarian Revolution and the cloak and dagger stories, as we would say, of the communists, and how my dad, amazing how he arguing with armed soldiers, just forged papers, escapes, of course, the places he hid, the clothes he had to wear to hide, and it's insane. So it's hard to believe, even as I'm looking at myself, and I still have to put the book down myself, and I've edited it probably 15 times by now, and it's been edited plenty of times, and it still puts me in tears. And these reviews I'm getting now, it really, they're moving to me, and it's so pleasing that people go out of the way to send these reviews and share them with everybody. And it's good for marketing, but more importantly, it's touching people, and that's the whole idea behind the book. So
nice,
absolutely, yeah.
So Robert, again, I don't know the history of Hungary, and I should, but I don't. Again, after the end of World War II, communists took over, and then your parents were still there, and at some point they left Hungary under the communist regime, I guess. Is that right?
Correct. It was after the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. So my dad had already gone to med school, and he was practicing OBGYN in Budapest.
Okay.
And then things that the citizens of Hungary, there was a rabble rouse. There was some rabble rousing, and they were tired of the communist regime. And some of the leadership was entertaining that and trying to change the nature. And of course, Stalin was in charge at the time, and the Russians didn't want any part of it. They wanted to own the country, and they sure did. I mean, they came in with the tanks and the soldiers, and they squelched the whole thing. I mean, so it was not a necessary war. And then, of course, there was always the question, why didn't the U.S. intervene? And was Russia hiding under the nuclear menace? And it was only a 2-week war, but what would we have been able to do? The United States could help so much, and that war ended so quickly. And the United States, it's our duty to protect our own people too. So I think that's a big part of not getting more escalation. And of course, they already had the Korean War, which wasn't so popular, and then after that, the Vietnam War, which is even less popular. So I wouldn't be too fast to jump on our own government and our own authorities as far as that goes, because they didn't have enough time to react. And
sure,
I think the U.S. did quite a bit in World War II. In fact, we were the game changer in that war for sure. I mean,
yeah. Wow. So maybe it is a lot, and
it's a lot. I mean, it's
and back to what you said at the beginning, it really, again, you hear things like that, and then if you stop and think about it, how blessed we are in this country. We have the right to disagree with each other. I do think some people take it too far, and and again, the ability to have a counter opposing conversation with somebody is a free speech thing, and should be able to be there. But at the same point in time, when the other person starts raising their voice and starts yelling and starts trying to kind of bully their opinion and view, that's a lot of what we see today. And unfortunately, I think the civil discord is not what it used to be, and I don't quite understand it. Some people blame social media, where you can basically hide behind a keyboard and say anything you want. I think that's definitely part of it. But but again, the ability to have free speech is a fundamental tenet of this country, and I really hope we can have some return to civility. So
I agree. It's funny. I'm trying to sell books, so I try not to make enemies, and I try not to get political. I see a lot of people that are political, people that I don't necessarily agree with politically are very interested in my dad's story. They're very interested in what had happened. And people that are bashing our government and our police force, and they don't have any idea. They don't have any idea how good they have it. They need to read my book and say, when the government's against you, not against you, not against her, not against him, they're against me. They're against me, my family, and the police help them along, and the Hungarian Quisling government, they help them along. And the only witnesses are the next victims or the previous victim. There's no lawsuits. There's no cameras, a few photographs at best, but there's no social media. Glad you brought that up. There's no attorneys to help you. There's no courtroom drama or anything like that. It was just, you're Jewish, you're screwed. I mean, that was pretty much how it was. If you were exposed and you did anything, go one step out of the way, then you were in trouble. You were arrested or tortured, persecuted, or killed. I mean, not much choice there. So,
wow.
And that's the big take home point too, is, and not just in the U.S. I mean, there's upheaval elsewhere. I hear in Hungary now, and even in Germany a little bit, and some of these other countries, that there's, of course, now talking about Brazil, and it's ongoing. And I wish it could end. I can't make it end myself, but I'd like to. I'm doing my little part in trying to keep the idea going that we do have it pretty good in this country. Let's not mess it up. Let's have a little more tolerance, not just for Jews and of course African Americans, and then Asians. And after 9/11, there was all this upheaval against the Muslim population, whereas the vast majority were peaceful, law-abiding people. And then, of course, the Asians after the COVID breakout, and it's on and on. I think a lot of it's just ignorance. I think it's just people that don't read, or that they're not educated on what they should really learn about. And being a physician, tolerance is an essential part of. There's no room for racism in medicine. I mean, if I'm a physician, I'm treating a patient. I'm treating a person, a boy, a girl, a man, a woman, whatever they come from, whatever their socioeconomic status, religion, et cetera, they're people, and I'd like to treat them as such, and I'd like to see more of that. So,
I think it's key too. What we mentioned earlier, like as far as I know, America is like one of the only ones that has actually guaranteed the right of free speech. And you've seen that, somewhat suppressed, I would say, with the social media and everything. Bringing down one point of view, pushing another point of view, and facts that were deemed to get you deplatformed 24 months ago, maybe perfectly acceptable. So there's just a lot of that I'm concerned about. The same thing that, the truth and real stories. And if you're more, I'd hate to see us ever get to a point where you can't have a point of view, you can't share it on a historical timeline that, it somehow is not in vogue or something like that. So I think these, like you said, your story, the stories of World War II, I mean, all this from history, I think we need to understand history so we don't repeat it. But I mean, just have an understanding where we came from and what can happen if things go too far. I mean, and some of the, obviously the largest, death came from own governments, right? I mean, not only Germany, but, China, you had Russia, millions and millions of people. So, I mean, there actually need to be some understanding of what can happen if things get too far out of line, which sounds like your story alludes to a lot of that, happening during one of those points in time.
I couldn't say it better myself. I mean, that's spot on. And even though I regret not doing it a long time ago, so that my parents' friends, that they're slowly passing away, many well into their 90s, and some still around that will be able to read the book, which I'm really grateful for. But that's the bad point about not doing the book earlier. But the good point is that in the last few years, all of that is accelerating. And the point that your government can take things away from you at any time, it's true, it's poignant. So so the timing is good with the release of this book, I think, even though it's kind of late. And I'm 60, I could have done it at 40, but there was a lot of time spent with this book. I'm doing 12, 13, 14-hour days sometimes, including the radiology. And sometimes I don't see the light of day, and I'm in beautiful sunny Florida. And I mean, maybe that's okay. It's less of a risk for skin cancer. But on the other hand, I should be chasing golf balls and bathing suits, golf balls and bikinis, and I try to squeeze a little of that time in. I get my occasional round of golf in and pickleball and try to go to the gym, but I hate when I have to miss because I'm so But on the other hand, if I'm missing because of long days, that means my book is getting some traction. My book is finally, because it's been 4 years of nothing, and now the last 2-3 months, everything's picked up. I mean,
so let's look at that for a second. So again, you're practicing radiologist. You've been able to, being smart and wise early on in your career, enable yourself that you could have less than a full-time schedule for many years of practice, which again is brilliant, and it allows you to spend time with family and friends, etc. And then you had this gem that was sitting there, and you decided, you know what, I'm going to do something with that. This memoir, this autobiography that your parents wrote. And what a gift. But at some point in time, it's so cool that you're able to turn that into a new path for yourself. You've written the story. You've been able to go through multiple edits, like you said. You've got it. Is the book out or not quite?
It's going to be released October 12th.
Okay.
And it will be available on Barnes and Noble online, and Amazon. I think most Amazon online, of course, and it'll be available as an ebook or Kindle, which currently is $3 a copy. Amazon paperback is $20 and I think it's $25.99 or $26.99 for the hardback. The hard copy is very nice. It's got a beautiful sleeve. We've got the author biography. Both of us, Janice Harper, who's my co-author, who's excellent, and I should talk about her for a minute too. But yes, that pivot, that 4 years, Janice was the turning point for my book, because I originally wrote the book. I turned my dad's autobiography into a biography, and it was kind of dry. It was like, Dad was born on, and Dad did this and this and this, what little conversation he had. But Janice really embellished, and she threw in more conversation, and she threw in letters to and from home, and very skillfully changed the orders of the events so that there was some parallel and there was some convergence, and then the story moved on. And the way she entitled the chapters was brilliant. The words "not a real enemy" is actually a chapter. It's how the Russians describe my dad. Literally the night before he escaped, his final escape, he had the guts, and I swear it was a thrill at this point of trying to get away with things, that he snuck into the medical school or the hospital building, the main office, between security guards to look at his own dossier. And that's how the Russians described him. Whereas many of his other physician colleagues were communist sympathizers or turncoats or even spies. And they would turn you in a heartbeat just to get a little bit of that, to get that little bump, and my dad and mom never fell for it. And how about politics, to blend that in? There's the Nazi party and there's the Communist Party, and you were in it or you were out of it. And my mom and dad refused any part of it. And so my dad just wanted to practice medicine, and he wasn't crazy about communism, but there it was. During peaceful Hungary, even though it was under communism, at least he was allowed to have a decent living and practice. And meanwhile, my mom was in medical school, so they would have done okay in Hungary. But the revolution, enough was enough. Two wars, and thirdly, when they finally, so "Not a Real Enemy" was in my dad's dossier. That's how the Soviets describe him. That's how Janice came up with that title and a title of one of the chapters. So, and then so my mom continued that thought well into her time in the United States, where she had Democrat friends and Republican friends, and some to the extreme side even almost. But my mom would educate them, saying, you don't want to be that extreme in either direction, because this is what's going to happen. And like we said, the things can get taken away from you very quickly when you don't expect it. The Jews were not allowed to own radios. The Jews were not allowed to have Jewish weddings. This and that, and eventually not allowed to work. I mean, and never mind Kristallnacht, when they started burning offices and personal businesses and people's homes, and expelling you. So my mom refused to belong even to a party in the United States. She said, I'm not going to classify myself as the Democrat or Republican. I'm going to vote for who I think the best candidate is. And one thing that when my mom passed, and really a nice compliment that her Merrill Lynch guy said when I was trying to work out her finances and everything else, was he noted how patriotic my mom was. That's one of the things that he said, as a patriotic American. And she loved Hungary. She loved her motherland. She loved Hungary. She was patriotic to the U.S. and of course Israel too. So, and any friendly country, any country that we could sympathize with, that were our true friends, like Canada and England, France, those kind of. So very, very patriotic people, despite all that they've gone through.
Yeah.
And again, I'm surprised they didn't have PTSD. My mom may have had a sliver of it, but it was well controlled. And she handled it by telling people the stories and making sure that they were educated. My dad, you never know, just jovial, jolly. Took my friends to the ball games, downtown Detroit, the most dangerous neighborhoods. He didn't care after what he went through. He wasn't care at all. He didn't care about the dangerous neighborhoods. And he was kind of a crazy driver too. He liked to, you know, on the S-shaped and snake-shaped roads in downtown Detroit. We used to take my friends. He'd pick up the speed a little bit, and we'd be on two wheels. Just having a little fun, kids, he used to say. And all my friends still remember that line. We're holding on for dear life. And he didn't care. Life was easy at that point. Getting up in the middle of the night, delivering two babies in the middle of the night. He loved it. That was nothing. Whereas a lot of doctors nowadays have burnout because of things like that. Extra call, extra weekends, obviously now insurances and diminished reimbursement and on and on and on. I mean, that's a whole other hour's discussion. So,
right. Yeah.
Not my dad though. Not my dad.
So again, if you would hold your book up, what it's called, not hold the book
Not
up.
a Real Enemy. Oh,
you want to?
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah, you want to hold it up?
Yeah, of course. Very proud of this, and I'm honored. I'm honored and privileged to be able to present my dad's life story, the biography of Ervin Wolf, MD, and my mom is in a good part of it, of course, Judit Wolf, and it's Not a Real Enemy: The True Story of a Hungarian Jewish Man's Fight for Freedom. Mm-hmm. And it's really well written. There was nothing that I left unturned. The book cover, the font, the format, the acknowledgments. And Janice is, she's also, besides being an author, she's an anthropologist and a book coach, and she's written several other books, and she's been great with advice. I mean, and that's something I've learned along the road is listen to what people tell you. You go to medical school, you'll learn a lot from books, but you learn a lot while you're in the OR, while in radiology, while you're sitting there reading studies, while I'm in the angio room doing procedures. You learn a lot and you listen to people. This is a whole different type of thing. This is like I got my PhD in English or history rather than medicine. It's a complete pivot. But the thing that changes, the thing that stays the same is that I listen to advice. I got a lot of good advice. Who to do the book cover? A little bit difficult. The guy was from Croatia. The guy doesn't do phone calls. He just does emails. Sometimes when it comes to paying him, he calls me, he gets right back to me. But when it comes to an issue, a week or 10 days, and I'm waiting for the guy, and my publisher, who's outstanding, Amsterdam Publishers, got to shout out to them. This is all they do. This is their genre: history, the Holocaust, the Judaica. And she's been doing it for 10 years. Lisbeth Hink in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and she's excellent. And she's still giving me advice. And the people that sent me to these people, Janice and other authors, still give me advice, and they're great. Book contests, where to market, how to market. And I have my own little team too. I've got a team that helps me with LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. I have a Facebook author page, a YouTube channel, a Google My Business page, a website, 2 email addresses. If that doesn't keep you busy, I mean, I'm lucky to meet you guys on LinkedIn, and I have a few other. I've got a Kevin MD podcast coming up this week, which is a big one. That reaches out to a lot of physicians. I'm on the SoMe Docs site. I'm just new to that. I mean, I've been following SoMe Docs, but that's a social media for docs, and a lot of it. The theme is burnout and pivot and change of it. A lot of it is getting medicine back into the hands of physicians, but a lot of it is else. And same with Kevin MD, different types of articles. And I'm my footprint is reaching out, and I've got a great team. I've got a book coach up north who's also an author. He did the website. He's good with advice. He got me started on Twitter. My videographer here, he's got his own studio. Started the 2 videos. We're going to do a third one discussing the book and the topics about the book. I've got another person that does SEO. She helps me with LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, my Facebook author page, and another kid helps me with Instagram. He's kind of my paparazzi kid down here in Florida.
Nice.
And I learned even from CNBC or things on TV, people saying you want young people to help you with social media, not necessarily with LinkedIn, because that's very professionally oriented, but with Instagram. And I'm not a TikTok type of guy. People, they like watching boobs rather than books, believe me. And that's TikTok. That's my view of it. But this kid's got a spin to it, where he can get me to be known on Instagram in our own little way. So
nice.
And he showed me an example of do you guys do real estate? I meant to ask you, is real estate your
Yeah.
Because he showed me an example of a real estate agent who had like 100,000 followers on Instagram. And this kid himself has 120,000 followers on Instagram. So I figured, why not spend a few shekels and get help? So nothing went unturned, and I'm still, this is top shelf, cover to cover. I'm not going to have a crappy cover and a good story. Or I'm not going to have a good story and nobody knows about it, so I hope to do a lot of these. I'll tell you that. And
good.
I'm honored this is my first one, and I hope I'm talking a little bit more slowly now and a little more concise, but I'm still rambling, I think.
No, but I think it's a key point of advice you just had in there. So, I mean, you didn't start off, like you said, you didn't start off in history, didn't start off in English literature. I mean, that's your forte wasn't writing and publishing books, right? You were medicine, and you pivoted to write this book, but you had the foresight and the self-realization that you needed help. So you went and found experts in the field and gained all their years of knowledge. And Richard always says too, that you can learn from other mistakes, but it saves a lot of time if you learn from somebody else. I mean, you can make your own mistakes, but it saves a lot of time if you learn from somebody else's. So that bringing those, multiple decades of experience in those different fields is critical to a successful launch and pivot, I believe.
That's a great point too. I did make mistakes. Some of it was trial and error. Early on, I was paying the wrong people to get very little done. Mm-hmm. So I did learn early on, but then after that, some of it's luck. There's again with the serendipity. Some of it's just luck. You just happen to run into the right people. They're honest. They might charge a lot, but you'll get your money's worth if you stick with them and you listen to them. I say to the residents and medical students back in the day, I would still say there's no substitute for experience, for sure. There's really no substitute for experience. And I was lucky, but yes, getting the help was essential. And now the book's alive. Now the book has meaning. The book's a product. And Janice helped me turn my dad's story into something very special that I'm really proud to share with people. So that's the gist of it. I'm very lucky. And yes. If you don't have good parents, you have nothing. I mean, I'll tell you that, because there are a lucky few that get out of, let's say, the ghetto, and you hear these stories about one working mother, with 6, 8, 10 kids in the house, and it's sad, and it's too bad. It doesn't mean they're a bad mother; they just not have time for their kids. It's not like the traditional Leave It to Beaver and the Brady Bunch and all those back in the day. Those days aren't. There's two income families now, and but hopefully kids that are growing up in those types of families either have help taking care of them, or good brothers and sisters, or lucky enough that their parents, even though they work a lot, they still care for them. They still give them that attention and teach them life's lessons. So if you don't have, so this is my repayment. Mm-hmm. This is my parents' legacy. I'm the only child of only children. I'm the last one left. I've got my wife up north and 2 daughters and we're ex-wife, but we're still good friends. She's still one of my best friends. We're amicable, and she supports the book. Thank God, because the book is costly too. And it's not on her, it's on me. We've got our own arrangement, and the kids are the same thing. I want it, and I'm lucky to have them, and they like me, they love me, and I'm grateful for that. So that is my family. But in the end, I'm the end of the line. I have no brothers and sisters. I have no kids of my own. My parents are gone, and I've got distant second cousins in Toronto and Israel, and that's about it. So this is my legacy, my family's legacy. I leave it fine as a present to my parents, and hopefully enough people read it that things can calm down a little bit. That hopefully we can.
Hopefully some people can take a lesson and a page out of this and go, look, let's all take it down a notch. You can have a civil conversation with other people. We don't have to escalate everything into such a conflict, in just regular dialogue like we talked about. So, yeah.
And Robert, we'll definitely put in the show notes, put a link to the book's website where they can get it. And is there any other channels you have as far as LinkedIn or anything you'd also like to leave the listeners with a way to reach out and find out about more?
Yeah, I can. I'll send you my book pitch. I guess I could just send you it's hola, big weekend. My book's out, blah, blah, blah. It's got my YouTube channel, my email address, my website, it's got Twitter and LinkedIn, I believe. I think I left Facebook out because I maxed out on Facebook anyway with 5,000 people. So we took on the Facebook author page for that overfill. But that surprisingly, Facebook has been the most receptive as far as social media. Even though I've gotten a lot of help with LinkedIn and Twitter and maybe more followers, it's got a lot more teeth in Facebook. But I hope to get that more in the other social media sites, because I've got a total of about 40,000 contacts now in climbing between all the sites and everything. So I'm really taking this seriously. Like I said, a good product doesn't mean anything if people don't know about it. So you have to tell people about it. And, humility, narcissism and humility, those are, you got to find a good balance between that, because you really get tired of talking about yourself. I want the book to be famous, not me. I want my dad's story to be famous, but unfortunately it's a hazard that people have to know me and know that I have a personality. I'm not just some guy at a desk, writing down my dad's story. So this is why we do this. This is why I post silly stuff on social media. I post serious stuff on social media, and I've been privileged enough the last 2 months to post a lot about my book on social media. Now I'm getting so much content between reviews and people with pictures of the book and their comments that there's no shortage of content now, for sure. So
right,
good.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Robert, we'd love to thank you for being on the Road Less Traveled show today. Really enjoy the conversation and wish you continued success in publishing the book. And we're anxious to hear more about it.
Appreciate it. And to answer your last question, I am going to send you the link, but yeah, Not a Real Enemy. If you Google that, you'll find me. You'll find the book. If you Google Robert J. Wolf, MD, you'll find me. There's an internist, also Robert J. Wolf, MD, but if you go right below him, I'm like, 2 through 10. And my Robert J. Wolf, MD is my YouTube channel, and my and robertjwolfmd.com is the website. And there's a lot of content in there, including some history videos, my 2 YouTube channel videos, the link to the book. It's it's a nice little docking station too. And then you can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn at Robert J. Wolf, MD. And please friend me, follow me, and give me feedback. Tell me about the book. Tell others about the book. It's the most brilliant marketing thing, the Land O'Lakes butter lady. She's holding the Land O'Lakes butter lady, who's holding the Land O'Lakes butter, who's holding the Land O'Lakes butter. It's the most. So you tell 10 friends, and they tell 10 friends, and so on and so on. And then
that's right.
But it doesn't have to be that many. But it's a dream. Let's get that book into the schoolroom. Let's get that book taught to kids. Let's get the youth back to normalcy. That's a big goal. It's one of my goals. So for sure.
That's
Excellent.
great.
Well, Robert, we'd like to thank you for being on. Really, we also want to thank our listeners. Please continue to give us a 5-star rating so we can bring you more great content like Robert Wolf today, Dr. Robert Wolf. And please remember, folks, a couple exciting things are for Park Capital Partners. We have the Park Capital Partners Value Add Fund. That is a 506c fund open to accredited investors. And we also have the Park Capital Partners Foundation. That is a 501(c) nonprofit. And the way that works real quickly is that Bill and I fund the operations of that foundation. So the money donated goes to do its best work, and that is to help others. Second, we donate personally, we donate corporately. And finally, when investors invest with us in one of our projects, we make a donation to honor them from a pre-selected list of 15 other charities and let that investor pick where they'd like that donation to go. So reach out to Bill and I, parkcapitalpartnersllc.com. Happy to speak with you anytime. And remember, folks, the road less traveled may be calling you. We recommend that you listen and take action. Thanks for joining.